Welcome to the 2021 Chairs Kickoff. I'm Gary Plummer, President and CEO of the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. Pleased that you joined us this morning for our annual Chairs event. Even though we are virtual, the engagement and excitement about this event is still there. We've had more than 500 people register to tune in. Events like the Chairs Kickoff wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsors and partners. I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of them now. The Chairman's Club program recognizes valued partners that invest in the Chamber at a high level through a variety of events and programs. Our Chairman's Circle members include Spirit Aerosystems, Koch Industries, and Cox. And our presidential partners include Textron Aviation, Evergy, and Intrust Bank. Our presenting sponsor today is Grant Thornton, and our program partner is Hutton. Our audiovisual partner is Kent Audiovisual. And our silver sponsors are AGH, CPA and Advisors, Butler Community College, Delta Dental of Kansas, Holston Siefken, Golden Plains Credit Unions, High Touch Technologies, Koch Industries, PB Hoydell Company, Professional Engineering Consultants, and Trans Systems Corporation. Thank you all for your support of this event and the Chamber. We'd also like to thank our 15 corporate host sponsors, which you'll see listed on your screen. A special welcome to area elected officials who are with us today. We have representatives from the City of Maize, City of Newton, City of Wichita, and Sedgwick County. Thank you to Mayor Whipple, Chairman Meitzner, and members of the City Council and County Commission for joining us today. And also we want to thank City Manager Bob Layton, County Manager Tom Stoles, and Superintendent Alicia Thompson for being with us. I'd like to now introduce Managing Partner Ken Clay with our presenting sponsor, Grant Thornton, who will share a few remarks with us today.
Thank you very much, Gary. Appreciate the time. We at Grant Thornton are very pleased to be able to continue our relationship with the Wichita Chamber as presenting sponsor of this year's virtual meeting. We appreciate and support all the Chamber does for businesses in our community, which has been especially evident during the pandemic. The commitment that the Chamber has shown to expanding its reach and helping businesses during this difficult time is very important. It's this leadership that's necessary to ensure we're all successful. Every year, the Chair's Kickoff program is a key driver in setting the stage for the rest of the year. And obviously, conscious leadership has never been more important than in our current environment. There are so many new challenges that we're all facing, and how to lead organizations and people through these uncharted waters is something that resonates with all of us. At Grant Thornton, this has been an almost daily focus as we think about our people and our clients and how we show up as leaders. So we are very pleased to have the opportunity to hear from a great leader on this very important topic. Thank you again to the Chamber for this opportunity. Gary, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ken, for joining us today, and Grant Thornton for being the presenting sponsor of this year's Chairs Kickoff. Many of you tuned in to the Chamber's special year-end broadcast event, Level Up 2020. During that broadcast, we acknowledged and celebrated the work of our 2020 Chair, Janetta Everett, retired Vice President of Professional Relations with Delta Dental. And we introduced you to our 2021 Chair, Ben Hutton. Ben was swinging a hammer as soon as he could lift it. By age 12, he was working construction job sites. And after graduating from Kansas State University, Ben joined a large construction company in Colorado Springs, where he worked as a project engineer until returning to Wichita in 2006. It was then that he started at Hutton as a project manager, and soon after was leading the company's business development efforts. In 2010, he became president of the company, and then in 2016 was named CEO. Ben's leadership has helped the company expand its capabilities, triple the number of employees, and recently move into a dynamic new headquarters in Delano. Ben's passion for advancing Wichita has compelled him to become involved at the highest levels with the Chamber and many community organizations. He's participated in a variety of Chamber programs and reshaped the Chamber's mission statement into a more impactful purpose statement. Ben challenges his peers and colleagues on our board of directors to reach higher and to include more voices in community problem solving. Ben's message this year is to lead well, and this Chair's Kickoff event will help equip us to do just that. Please join me in welcoming Ben Hutton.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. I'm excited to welcome each of you today and appreciate you joining us to recognize the work of the Chamber and learn from businessman and thought leader John Mackey. Before we get to our discussion with John, we want to share with you what you can expect from the Chamber in 2021. The Chamber's work is not possible without the support and dedication of our volunteer board of directors and more than 1,400 members. As this year's Chamber Chair, I want to focus on three critical areas. The first is leading well. The second, becoming people and purpose focused in our businesses. And third, dreaming big and acting boldly in our community. You know, Jeanette Everett set us on an impactful trajectory for the Chamber last year as our chair. And I'm looking forward to continuing that work with her mentorship and support as we move the business community forward. I'm also fortunate to work closely with Chair-elect Damon Young of Mahaney Group and our first Vice Chair, Joy Akins of Cornerstone Data. Now, the Chamber's volunteer leadership doesn't stop there, though, especially as we continue to focus on our strategic plan. So for the area of small business, we are going to benefit from the knowledge and experience of our newly appointed Vice Chair of Small Business, Jen Ray of the Monarch. You know, Jen's going to work closely with Joy, who previously held that role and is now preparing to become chair in 2023. Did you know that more than 80% of our current membership is made up of businesses with 100 or less team members? So it's vital to enhance our value proposition to them and in turn the Chamber's position as a hub for small business. We will also ensure access to high quality programming for networking, education, visibility by partnering with the Chamber, other Chamber members, the city, and other community organizations. In the area of talent, Kyle Ellison of Real Men, Real Heroes is serving as our Vice Chair, and Jason Cox of Cox Machine as our Vice Chair of Leadership. The Chamber and W, a community of young professionals, is continuing to make strides in leadership development by engaging diverse talent in the region with long-standing and new programs. Talent is essential to the success of our region, and the Chamber is committed to leading that effort. Our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion is led by Vice Chair of Inclusion, Ed O'Malley from the Kansas Leadership Center. In order to inform people, policies, and practices that will strengthen the access and opportunity, the Chamber has committed to improving minority business growth, establishing a network of practitioners to increase DEI knowledge and tools, and also to advocate for racial justice. For Pride in Place, Victor Ojale of Cargill is serving as our Vice Chair. In order to continue increasing engagement in our Pride in Place efforts, we're focused on increasing the visibility of the Wichita flag and continuing our I Love Wichita movement, but also diving back into the conversation on the Riverfront Legacy Master Plan. Expect big things from Victor this year there. The area of advocacy is led by our Vice Chair, Karma Mason from ISI Environmental. Now, the Chamber's government relations team is developing and advocating for pro-business policies at all levels of government all the time. And this includes, right now we're creating a soon-to-be approved local and federal policy agendas, and that's in addition to the state legislative agenda that we approved late last year. And last but not least, sustainability. Led by our board treasurer, Andrea Scarpelli of Emprise Bank, we're focusing on membership recruitment and retention, developing new revenue streams, and investing in human resources to maintain the financial integrity and long-term sustainability of the Chamber. You know, these efforts will also benefit from the support of our Vice Chair of Membership Development, Greg Klenda of Klenda Law, and Vice Chair of Membership Retention, Jose Gutierrez of Farmers Insurance. Thank you to each of our Vice Chairs, our entire Board of Directors, and all of our members for your commitment. You know, the Chamber is fortunate to have such dedicated, knowledgeable, and passionate volunteers leading the charge in these 6 strategic priority areas. Before we move into our keynote discussion with John, we have a short message to share from today's presenting sponsor, Grant Thornton.
The unexpected will always challenge us. Markets will always defy predictions. Supply chains will always have risks, and Grant Thornton will always be there with insights, collaboration, and scale. So you're ready for whatever comes next.
John Mackey is the co-founder and CEO of Whole Foods Market, which he built from a single store in Austin, Texas in 1978 to a Fortune 500 company which he took public in '92 and was later acquired by Amazon in 2017. You know, today Whole Foods has more than 500 stores and 95,000 team members spread all across the United States, Canada, and the UK. And while he's devoted his career to leading this organization and bringing organic and natural foods to the consumers there, he's also focused on doing business differently, more consciously. John is a strong believer in free market principles, and he co-founded the conscious capitalism movement and wrote a book by the same title in 2013. And both of those challenge us to defend and reimagine capitalism for the future and think about it a little bit differently. He's been recognized by a lot of organizations for his leadership through the years. Fortune called him one of the world's 50 greatest leaders. EY, Entrepreneur of the Year, Barron's, the world's best CEO, and the list goes on. In addition to conscious capitalism, he also wrote 2 cookbooks, The Whole Foods Diet, The Whole Foods Cookbook, and then most recently, Conscious Leadership, which is a lot about what we'll talk about today. In addition to work, he's also an avid backpacker, lives in Austin with his wife, Deborah, and they love to go on long hikes. So, John, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm super excited for our conversation.
Thanks for having me on, Ben. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So in August of 2019, the Business Roundtable, which is a collection of some of the largest companies in our country or best known CEOs, they came out with a statement that really redefined the purpose of business as they saw it. And in it, they recognized that while business has a responsibility to create a return for shareholders, it also needs to recognize the impact that it has on its customers, suppliers, communities. And the statement really called for business to balance the return for all of these stakeholders. I remember when it came out, it was a really big deal, kind of shocked the business world. But you've been talking about some of these ideas, certainly since 2013 when conscious capitalism came out, and even really before that when you founded Whole Foods. So when did this idea or this line of thinking start for you?
I mean, I guess my first taste of it, Ben, was back actually after we opened up a small store called Saferway in '78. We were there a couple of years, and then we relocated it, merged with another store that was similar to ours, and opened the first supermarket natural food store in Texas, and changed the name to Whole Foods Market. And 9 months, and that became the highest volume natural food store in the United States very quickly. But within 9 months opening that store, Austin experienced a 100-year flood. We built it in the 100-year flood zone. And I thought, okay, well, what does that mean? It means about once every 100 years, we're going to have 8 feet of water in the store. Well, it turned out that wasn't our first year. We had a 100-year flood. And so we were really out of business. I mean, we were a fledgling business. We didn't have flood insurance, which you get from the government. No private insurer stupid enough to do that. And I thought we were done. And but an amazing thing happened the next day. We came to work, and we had all of these neighbors and customers were in the store working alongside us to clean up our store. They didn't want us to die. They wanted us to get back open again. And I didn't have the word stakeholders back then. I never heard of that phrase. But what I saw were all of these different constituencies of Whole Foods: customers, our team members, our suppliers. Our team members worked. We couldn't pay them, so that for the first 30 days while we rebuilt, they just worked, and then we eventually paid them back. Our suppliers fronted us new inventory on credit. Our investors kicked in more money. Our bank made a bank loan. All of the stakeholders, all of the constituencies saved Whole Foods Market from this death that we should have died. And that was my first inkling. It's like, wow, we're embedded in this community of relationships. We're not just a business. We are serving, and we are serving, and they are serving us. All of these different stakeholders, all these different constituencies. And so that was my first inkling of stakeholders. Now, I'd always been very mission driven. I mean, I don't have a business background. I guess I have a business background now, but when I got started, I didn't have a business background. And I was just very I was very purpose driven. I really wanted to sell natural and organic foods. I was on fire about the idea of how you ate affected your health, your vitality, your longevity. This was all a revolutionary idea for me back in my early 20s. So I had a sense of purpose, then I add the stakeholders to it. And we just did business in a different way than most other companies. I think maybe because I didn't have that business background. So the answer to your question, the long about way, is pretty early on. I had an inkling, and it's just grown since then.
Sure. So thinking about conscious capitalism and the book that you published on it, there's really 4 tenets of conscious capitalism that you outline there: a higher purpose, stakeholder integration, conscious leadership, and conscious culture and management. Can you give us just a brief overview of each of those as background for our conversation today?
Sure. Well, every business has this potential for a higher purpose besides just maximizing profits. It's not there's anything wrong with maximizing profits. Every business has to make money or it'll die. But just as my body has to produce red blood cells, if I stop producing red blood cells, I'm going to die. It doesn't follow the purpose of my life is to produce red blood cells. Similarly, business must make money or it will die. But that doesn't mean that's why it exists. Ultimately, business exists to create value for other people. I would argue all the stakeholders, but at the very least, it exists to create value for customers. Mm-hmm. Because profits are a result of creating value for customers. And so business can find its higher purpose by looking at its value creation that it's doing, and the purpose lies within that. So Whole Foods' higher purpose is to nourish people on the planet. That language wasn't there at the beginning, but that intention was there at the beginning, and we got the language later. And so purpose is, we should be in the business of maximizing purpose rather than maximizing profits. Profits will follow from fulfilling the purpose of the business generally. So stakeholders, we just talked about a little bit. Those are the major constituencies that a business trades with. So we trade with customers, we create value for them, we create value for our team members, and we give them jobs, and they exchange labor for their time. But we also give them benefits, also opportunities for growth, learning, promotions. I mean, so many people that work for Whole Foods have been there 20, 30, in some cases 40 years. And and so that's been a benefit for them. And then we talk about the suppliers that trade with you. I mean, Whole Foods where would we be without our suppliers? We wouldn't exist. I mean, because we're not growing the food, we're not raising the cattle, we're not brewing the wine, brewing the beer, or it's all done by our suppliers, tens of thousands of suppliers around the world. So we create value for them, they create value for us, and there's communities that we're part of. And then there's the investors that have risked their capital in the company and deserve and have received rich rewards for being investors. So those are the stakeholders. And the idea is that in conscious capitalism, you're conscious that there's a system of stakeholders and you're creating value for all of them. You just do it more consciously. Most businesses do it automatically, just don't think about it. And then the leadership, conscious leadership. I mean, what is conscious leadership? I mean, I just wrote a book on it. So we've got 9 different chapters, each of which represents a different aspect of being a conscious leader. But the short of it is, a conscious leader is a leader who's just more aware of the purpose of the business, more aware of their own purpose, who tend to have a higher degree of emotional and spiritual intelligence. They understand stakeholders. They see the system that we're part of. They are just more awake, more aware. And then they lead in such a way that the business flourishes. So America needs more conscious leaders. We lack conscious leaders in this country. I see it really now in politics. We don't need just conscious leaders in business. We need them in government. We need them in politics. We need them in education, healthcare, the military, all different aspects of our society. Now, conscious culture is, in a sense, people take their culture for granted, but culture is the fabric that an organization exists in. And I like the garden metaphor that if you have a garden, if you don't tend to it, all these weeds grow in the garden and they will choke out your healthy plants, your healthy vegetables you're trying to grow. So you've got to weed out the toxic elements, and you have to nurture the healthy plants, make sure they get enough food and water and sunlight and the right soil mixture and whatnot. So I think managing a culture similar to that. So a conscious culture is one that you are helping to protect the culture, nourish the culture, so that human beings will flourish in the organization. That the culture is a healthy culture where people reach their highest potential. So purpose, leadership, stakeholders, leadership, and culture. Those are the 4 pillars of conscious capitalism.
Sure. And like you mentioned, I think a lot of businesses do a lot of these things automatically or without putting these labels on them.
Without being conscious.
Conscious of them, right.
Then once you're conscious of them, you can do them better.
Right. And so that's been part of my journey over the last few years since discovering.
Part of all of our journey. Me too.
And so it's been helpful for me to have those labels, and it's been helpful for me to try and think about how do I take these concepts, which in your book originally described in a retail setting, and apply them to a construction job site setting, like in my business, or a manufacturing setting for others of our members here in Wichita. And so, but empirically, or just thinking about the numbers of business, it's hard sometimes to think about these soft concepts when we're up against hard requirements for keeping our business going or making a payroll. And so, I mean, the question in the back of my mind, especially at the beginning, was, does this work? Is it gonna work? Have you done some research or looked into kind of the numbers behind this way of thinking about business?
My co-author of Conscious Capitalism, Raj Sisodia, his precursor to Conscious Capitalism, he wrote a book called Firms of Endearment. And in that, he identified 30 companies that were a firm of endearment is a business that's loved by all of its stakeholders, loved by its customers, loved by its employees, loved by its suppliers, and loved by its investors. And that's how I met Raj, because Whole Foods is one of the 30 companies that he did in that book. And so I wanted to meet this guy after I read the book, and we got together and we had a lot in common. And together we sort of co-founded the Conscious Capitalism nonprofit and the movement. And Raj's research showed that the companies that take care of all their stakeholders economically outperform tremendously. These companies outperform in the stock market, outperform in terms of market growth, market capitalization growth, in terms of market share. In almost every metric, they outperform the businesses that are not loved to the same degree. So granted, that's not a systematic research, but because it's hard to measure how conscious you are, every business puts a purpose statement on their wall someplace. They may or may not live up to it, but they certainly tip their hat to it. And people will acknowledge that stakeholders matter, but how do they act in the real world? As you say, what do you do when you're up against it? So you could ask the same question about ethics in a way. So, I mean, there's always the gray areas where, if I could get away with that, it would certainly, I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but it would sure help the bottom line here. And so we have to operate our businesses in such a way that we're ethical, we're purposeful, and we're successful. Those are not opposites. They actually tie closely together. Sorry.
You're good. So I actually, in my search for learning and support about conscious capitalism, I stumbled into Raj's book as well, and I found it so affirming to see that there were other companies that had pursued this, and it really gave me the confidence to take some steps down that road that have turned out wonderfully for my organization.
Ben, you know what, when I read Friends of Endearment many years ago now, my first thing was, oh my God, I'm not alone.
Right, exactly.
I thought Whole Foods was just this totally weird company that nobody else was doing these kind of things. I just thought we were like way out in the frontier. And to just find other organizations sharing the same principles and values was very reassuring that we weren't utterly crazy.
Yes, exactly.
Now, of course, we have a movement, and you find out there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies that are trying to live by these principles.
Yep. Yeah, and just the affirmation that companies that pursue this, not only do they keep up with their peers, but they actually outperform them was awesome.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing for people to get, because they believe that they believe there's a trade-off.
Right.
Yeah, if I do these things, I'm going to make less money. I'm not going to be as successful. I'm kind of a sucker. I'm a fool for doing this.
Yeah.
But that hasn't been my personal experience, and that isn't the experience of the firms of endearment companies. It's not the experience of many, many, many of the entrepreneurs and CEOs of companies that I've met through the Conscious Capitalism nonprofit organization and our conferences. Most of them say, once I began to operate this way, my business became more profitable and more successful.
Yeah, that's been exactly my experience. So shifting gears a little bit, conscious capitalism, you asked us to think about business differently. And in conscious leadership, you asked us to think about leadership differently and maybe in a more holistic way. You line out these 9 mindsets that really outline how we should think about leadership and how it impacts the people that are following us, the communities we work in and we live in. I want to talk about just a couple of those mindsets today with our time. The first that I wanted to hit, though, was this idea of leading with love. When I think about leadership in business, love's not the first word that comes to my mind. And so I would wonder just if you would describe, like, what does that mean and how do you apply that?
I will confess that's my favorite chapter in the book. In my co-authors, I spend a lot of time on that particular chapter because it's near and dear to my heart. If you think about it, what you said is how most people think about it. It's like, what does love have to do with business? And my first response is everything. It has everything to do with it. However, the reason why love is usually not thought of as something that's part of business, it's because the metaphors that we use to think about business fall into 3 major categories, and they're all hyper-competitive metaphors. The first one is war metaphors. We got to kill the enemies, and we take no prisoners.
Right, conquer the hill.
Yeah, and conquer the hill. Let's go to the war room. Let's get our campaign planned out. Let's go motivate the troops. There are all these war metaphors that we use in business. If we're not using war metaphors, we're frequently using Darwinian metaphors. It's the survival of the fittest. The jungle out there. Only the paranoid survive. And so there's this, and the third one is sports metaphors or game metaphors, where there's winners and losers, and you're either a winner or a loser. It's a zero sum. You either win or you lose. Winning is not everything. Winning is the only thing. We look at football and we look at basketball and baseball, and we get a lot of let's throw the touchdown pass. Let's get together for the huddle. That's a slam dunk. That's a slam dunk idea. That's a home run. I mean, we pepper our. So all of these, in those 3 categories of war, Darwinian, survival of the fittest, and sports and game metaphors, they're all hyper competitive. And here's the thing: competition's part of business, but it's not really what business is primarily about. I mean, most forms of competition, there's one winner and one loser, or one winner, lots of losers. Winner take all is another type of metaphor that's a game metaphor. But in reality, think about it. There's lots of winners in business. I mean, you're in the construction business. Ben, you have a lot of competition, but there's lots of successful construction companies out there. There's lots of successful grocery stores out there that Whole Foods competes with. And what we're really about is creating value for our customers, right? Fulfilling our higher purpose. And yes, you have to pay attention to competition, but once you realize that competition isn't the main thing about business, It's just part of it. It is not the real driver of it. Then you create the space for love to come back in the organization. Because if you're at war, if you're truly trying to, it's a survival of the fittest to the death struggle, or if there's only one winner and lots of losers, then maybe love has no place. But in fact, love is like the most human thing we can do. When we get to the end of our lives, I doubt there's anybody that's listening to this that's going to be on their deathbed and they're going to be thinking, man, I wish I'd worked a little harder.
Yeah.
God, I wish I'd made more money. I wish I'd won that competition. It's going to be about relationships. It's going to be about the people that we love, our significant other, our children, our friends, our families. Those are the things that matter the most in life at the end of the day. And so to not have love in our workplaces, I mean, love is not a weakness. Love is strong. Love is the glue that holds an organization together. It's why people work for Whole Foods for 20, 30, 40 years, because they feel loved. I have found, in my experience in business, if you want people to stick around your company for a long time, there's two major things they're looking for. A, they're looking for purpose. Everybody wants to feel like their work is actually making a contribution to making the world a better place somehow or another. And secondly, they want to feel that somebody cares about them and that there's people that they care about themselves. We are embedded in a web of relationships. And I can tell you that Whole Foods is a company based on love. And the relationships are very strong in our organization. And that doesn't mean they're not professional. It doesn't mean, I'm not talking about romantic love or sexual love. Arguably those may be best not in the workplace.
Right.
I'm talking about the bonding that occurs, that when you're working closely with people and you're building something together and you're creating value for other people, you get so close to them. You're going through the good times together, you go through the hard times together. And that's what makes it all worthwhile, the relationships that you have. That's why I've been doing this for 43 years, because I love the people I work with. I love the team members. I love Whole Foods. And so love is it's not a luxury. It's a necessity in business. But we can't let it in as long as we're afraid of the hyper-competitive metaphors. So leading with love is, we need that desperately. I just don't see that much love in leadership in America. It's another thing that's really missing. I don't see our political, they're all struggling with each other to punish and hate and attack. It's very divisive on both sides of the political spectrum. And gosh, it's tearing our country apart. We need to be more forgiving, more caring, more generous. And I think business people can lead the way here, because I think if we build an organization, we probably really do love it. And I suppose you love your company, you love the people you work with, because that's part of what the great satisfaction in building a business is all about. It's not just the money. The money matters. I don't want people thinking the profits aren't important. They are important, but there are things that are even more important than that. And I just think love needs to be, we need to let it out of the corporate closet, and we need to encourage in our organizations, and we need to embody it ourselves, and we need to lead with love. If we do, we will find our organizations are more resilient and ultimately more successful.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I love our business, but more than that, I love the people that I work with. And I think about all the stories they tell of all the years they spent at our company. And for the most part, they aren't about the buildings that they built or something they're especially proud of that's physical. They're about how they took care of one of their coworkers or cared for one of our clients through the years. And this was my favorite chapter in your book too. And so it was a leading question for sure. But I love it. And I think that this concept is especially important with everything going on in our world right now, between the pandemic and the social conversations we've been having and economic uncertainty. The requirement to have care and love and empathy for our team members is higher than ever, and it's more valued than ever. And so I just love the idea and the challenge that this chapter presented. So appreciate that. So I want to shift into another mindset here. And this one seemed a little obvious to me. It was think long term, right? And so the first thing in my head was, I mean, don't most businesses do that already? We have 5-year, 10-year plans that we talk about, and we make these big goals. Think long term. Why did you feel like this was rose to the level to put as a whole chapter in your book?
I don't think most businesses do think long term. I think particularly if they're a public company, they have quarterly, and Whole Foods was a public company for 25 years before we sold to Amazon. You're under a lot of pressure to hit short-term goals. And much of the incentive structure that we give in business is for yearly goals, right? And you get your bonus based on achieving certain goals. People begin eventually to game the system to try to get their own compensation up, their bonuses up, and they may be trading off the future for this year's bonus. I watched at Whole Foods, for example, that a lot of our regional presidents began, because of their way their bonus was structured, they began to not reinvest enough in their stores to upgrade the stores on maintenance, because those would be expenses. They're trying to, if they would cut back on capital investments in their stores to upgrade older stores. And if you do that, you've got depreciation expense going up. Or if you're doing maintenance, you have a current expense. So I watched them basically trade off the long-term for short-term bonuses. I think it's far more common than we believe. If you're the founder, the CEO, you're always thinking long-term. That doesn't mean the organization's thinking long-term. And unless you're conscious of that, you're going to see your other people game the system for their own short-term gains and benefits. So it's up to the leader to shift the focus of the business towards the long-term, change the compensation structure, the incentive programs to reward projects that last over not just 1 year, but over multiple years. And think long-term also recognizes that chapter recognizes how quickly the world is evolving. It's constantly changing. I mean, the question I get asked the most often when the question I get asked most often by journalists is, did you ever think you'd get this big? And the second question I get asked is predictions about the future. What do you think the grocery business is going to be like in 10 years or 20 years? And my standard answer to that is, well, gosh, if you just go back 20 years ago, think about how different the world was 20 years ago. No, not one person in the world had a smartphone 20 years ago, Ben. Now the entire culture is addicted to them. Everybody walks around staring at their phones all the time, right? And we have social media didn't exist 20 years ago. There was no Google existed, but almost nobody was using it 20 years ago. There was no Facebook, there was no Tesla, there was no Uber, there's no Airbnb. The world was completely different. And it's going to be very different in the future. So we need to be aware that the world is constantly changing and evolving. I mean, who would have predicted COVID, right? I mean, you could have predicted it, but here we are almost a year later, and the world's completely different than it was a year ago. It's very, very bizarre. So we have to think long term. We have to always have our minds flexible enough not to see that change is going to come at us from unexpected directions. And we need to be thinking about that and be ready to adapt and evolve as new things enter into the marketplace. And speaking about competition, some of our competitors are going to introduce disruptions that may change the very nature of the competitive plane that we're on. So it's very important that the leaders think long term, very important that they structure their business not to have too much focus on the current. You got to take care of business, right? So you got to take care of business. I'm not saying you don't have to focus on operations, you don't have to execute. But if that's all you do, eventually the world's going to change completely around you in unexpected ways, and your business is going to be disrupted, become irrelevant.
Yeah, it's easy to see in the publicly traded realm how we've gotten into this such short quarterly mindset, right? Results. And I think we're sometimes blinded to how much that has drifted into the private and small business world in just the ways you've talked about. And even more than that, I guess I appreciate you helping make the case that investing in building maintenance and capital projects is always a good idea. So we don't.
It's one that's easily neglected because, it's like investing in your health, right?
Right, exactly.
You don't see the negative consequences immediately, but in the long term, you do. Same thing with our businesses. If we're not investing in them and taking care of the future, then eventually the future arrives and we're unprepared for it.
Yep, exactly. So shifting into one of the last mindsets that I wanted to talk about today, for me, this last year, 2020, was exhausting, right? With everything that happened with the virus, trying to deal with like daily changing circumstances for our business, leading our people through that, trying to take care of our clients, trying to take care of my family through all of that. At times it just was overwhelming. And I didn't keep up sometimes, and I felt like I wasn't doing a great job at other times. But eventually we made it through it. But when I got to the end of 2020, I was so happy for 2021 just because it felt like a fresh start, but I was worn out. One of your mindsets is to regularly revitalize. All of the other mindsets or things in this book are focused on other people, how we lead other people, or philosophies to have. This one, it looks inward though. Talk about why you included this in your book here.
I think because building a business it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's to build something great, it's going to take you a long time, perhaps decades. And I've seen so many people burn themselves out. America has somewhat of a romance with workaholism. At least my generation has had that. And people would brag about how little sleep they get, how many cups of coffee they drink, how many all-nighters they pull, how many 80-hour work weeks they do, or 100-hour work weeks, which is ridiculous. And we're basically destroying ourselves. So revitalizing is recognizing that we need to recharge ourselves, and we go to the different areas where that matters. So we talk about healthy eating, we talk about exercise, we talk a little bit about sleep, importance of sleep, we talk about stress management, but also getting in, there are all kinds of different ways we can recharge, and each person needs to kind of figure out the best way for them to recharge. I like to go hiking. I'm a backpacker. I like to get out in nature. That recharges me when I'm in a forest or in the sunlight, and not, and I'm it's kind of like there's a joke at Whole Foods that people used to hate to see me go away on a hike because they knew when I came back, I was going to have all these new ideas and half of them, they were going to be crazy ideas but getting away from the business means you can also get it in perspective. You can begin to see it, not in the day-to-day crush of the problems of the day, but you get away from it and you can once again see it in its greater context. And so a lot of my best creative ideas have come when I'm revitalizing, when I'm recharging my batteries, so to speak, if you want to use that type of metaphor. And I think it's neglected in business. I think business people have a macho, workaholic mindset, and they think that's the right way to do things. And I'm not arguing you shouldn't work hard. And God knows I've worked really hard. I've built a business. I put my life energy into it, for no doubt about it. But here I am. I'm 67 years old. I've been doing this business for 43 years. I'm in probably the best health I've been in a long time because I take good care of myself. And I just think this is a very important chapter in the book because it's relatively neglected. And you know what? Too many of my friends have had heart attacks, have gotten cancer, have gotten obese, have diabetes. They've ruined themselves. And that's a tragedy. So this is one of my favorite chapters in the book too. It's in the top 3, right? I also like that chapter, Find Win-Win-Win Solutions, because I just think it's a very important idea. But regularly revitalize is extremely important.
Yeah, no, it really hit home for me. You know, and you mentioned this being an issue for your generation. It's an issue for mine too. I mean, you hear so much in business now about hustle culture, this idea of in the startup community that you're going to succeed by simply outworking everybody. And while working hard is important, it's not sustainable over the long run if you're not really doing your job to take care of yourself. I know for me, it's hiking. For you, it's woodworking for me. And so, but between all the money I've spent on tools and my time, I build the most expensive furniture known to man, I think. But that's where I recharge and where I get those same ideas. And so
how satisfying it must be. Because you're being creative there. You're creating things with your hands that actually probably are also have utility or beauty or both. So
no, exactly. It's incredibly rewarding. And when I come out of the workshop, I'm a different person than when I went in. And so I've found that I have to intentionally schedule that time, or I fill my days up with other things.
How old are your children, Ben?
14, 13, and 11.
Are any of those in the workshop with you?
A couple of them enjoy it. Yeah, one of them I'm still working
You
on.
have that shared activity with your children as well.
Yep, and that's where I picked it up from my dad. So
That's also revitalizing for you.
it is. It's incredibly revitalizing. So, well, John, thanks so much for taking time to talk about conscious capitalism and conscious leadership with us today. You know, we've got the Conscious Leadership book going out to everybody that's in the meeting today, and so they'll get to dig into that in more details. But between all of these concepts, there is so much to take in. And I think it's easy to look at all of it and say, where do I even start? Like, where can I apply this in my business or in my leadership? And so do you have a suggestion for somebody that's brand new to these ideas on what to do first?
Purpose. The first chapter in the book is put purpose first. Purpose is, I've known lots of entrepreneurs. They're almost all purpose driven, but not all of them are conscious about their purpose because they haven't. It's tacit. They're driven by something, but they haven't yet become conscious of what's driving them or why they're doing what they're doing. But they're driven, and so the first thing to do is become conscious of why you're doing what you're doing. What is it that you really want to achieve here? And oftentimes that's complex, by the way, because there could be a lot of motivations. But that's the first step. First step is to get conscious of purpose.
Awesome.
And Ben, I'll say one other thing to the group here, which I hadn't said so far. I think business is the most important function in the world. Business, we are treated oftentimes as the villains in the tale, and business is disparaged as selfish and greedy, and all it cares about is money. And that's an inaccurate stereotype, mostly by intellectuals who don't understand or like business and never have. I think business people are the heroes. We are the people that are creating progress in this world. We're taking the ideas of science and we're applying them. We're innovating. We're entrepreneurs who are creating the new. And we're employing people. We're creating value in the world. We're heroes. And I just don't think business people hear that enough. We're the heroes. We're the ones that are helping make this world a better place. And we don't always get credit for it, but I want to tell each person that I'm talking to today, you're all heroes and you're doing good work in the world and you should be proud of yourselves.
Thank you. We appreciate that, John. And thank you again so much for joining us today. I know this has been a challenging journey for me over the last few years, but it's been incredibly rewarding as well. And I'm so excited that you were able to help me share these ideas with our business community here in Wichita and the surrounding region. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So
thanks, Ben. I'm happy to share, and I wish you the very best, and I wish everyone out there success, prosperity, and a happy and good life.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and to all of our members, I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today with John. You know, for me, this really has been incredibly impactful, and it's made a gigantic difference in my personal life, my leadership in my business, and the success of my organization over the years. And so I'd really encourage you, when you get the book, Conscious Leadership, soon, to dig into that. And here's my challenge, actually. is within the next 2 months. Read that and then find another of our chamber members and have a discussion about how it impacted you and what your next steps are there. And I'd love to hear from you on those as well. So thank you again. I can't wait to hear about all of the impact that this book and these ideas have in your business.
We're Grant Thornton. We are an audit, tax, and advisory firm, part of a global network of 50,000 employees in over 130 countries. Offering faster, tailored solutions, and with a commitment to quality. So why haven't you heard of us? Because when you're as focused on serving your clients as we are, it's hard to beat your own drum.
Thank you, Ben. And a very special thank you to John Mackey for providing such a thought-provoking message for all of us today. This was quite a way to start 2021. Thank you again to Grant Thornton, our presenting sponsor, and Hutton, our program partner, and to our silver sponsors, corporate host sponsors, and other partners for making this event possible. I want to also thank Chelsea Dyer and the staff at the Chamber for pulling this outstanding event together today. We are also grateful to all of you for your interest in learning more about conscious leadership and how it can be applied to move the Wichita community forward. We look forward to hearing your takeaways, especially after you receive your own copy of John Mackey's book, Conscious Leadership. Once you receive the book, we encourage you to read it within the 2 months and then call a fellow chamber member to discuss it. And keep an eye out following this event for an email with ways to further engage with the chamber. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.